Are you looking to transition, transform, and evolve in every dimension of your business and life? If you said yes, then welcome to the Alchemy of Business Show, a podcast that mixes practical, actionable business solutions with soulful insights for anyone seeking deeper meaning in their lives and greater success in their work. We'll be featuring purpose-driven leaders from all walks of life and getting insight into their journeys from failures to triumphs. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host of the Alchemy of Business Show, Steve Rodgers.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening in or viewing in. However you got here, you might be on YouTube, maybe you're on iTunes, maybe you're on Roku. I'm not sure, but I'm just glad that you are here. We have an amazing show for you today. I am so thrilled to have our guest that I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment. But I've known this gentleman in business and now personal for 6 or 7 years now, and just astonished at what he's done in his life and what he does in his business and in his continued journey of himself. But on the show, as many of you that have listened in know that we talk about this show, Alchemy of Business, helping businesses become more productive, more profitable, more on purpose. We also are focused on our guest sharing ideas that can help us all make wiser decisions, help create greater profits in our life and businesses, and also my hot button is creating higher purpose and meaning in life. And the gentleman that we have on the show today, Mr. Paul Morris, he embodies all of this. He is an entrepreneur, investor, author, consultant. Paul is really a prolific entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is not only is he in real estate, but he's a serial entrepreneur in various businesses where people ask him for his advice, ask him for his investments. And he's gone from having a law career that we're going to talk about when he got his law degree from Cornell University to then go from law into real estate. And he learned how to take these skills of his discipline, being first an academic person who wasn't really academic, but used academia to get to where he needed to go. And then he used this to build his own business in an unexpected way in real estate in Los Angeles. He ended up connecting with a franchise called Keller Williams, and he and his team have become one of the largest franchises in the country for Keller Williams. He also has a company that has multiple offices. They've got about 15 offices. They have numerous transactions, 10,000 plus transactions they're doing a year. And as a CEO of this company, his ranking throughout multiple ranking lists in the real estate industry on a national level always puts him in the top 50 or 100 as an individual, as one of the most influential people in real estate. But his company is also ranked continually in number one in transactions in Los Angeles and various times in the top 20 or 30 companies in the country. So Paul today is going to come and share with us how he became this glorious, successful entrepreneur and what we can learn from Paul on building our lives and business in a better way. So welcome, Mr. Paul Morris.
Hey, Steve. Thanks. I love the intro.
Hey, you're welcome. Well, isn't it funny when someone intros you or you read your bio and you go, God, I really have done all that. And you're like, shit, you sometimes wonder what you've done with your life. And then you go, gosh, I guess I have done all that.
I used to hate to, whenever I was interviewed, I used to hate to sit through the bio because we're like, I just want to get in there and share some stuff. And they're reading about all this great stuff I've done. And what if I don't do as well as the bio says? But you did a great job. So I don't mind coming after that bio at all.
Well, I've always had a great admiration for you and what you do because you and I have very similar, but also very different paths. I've mentioned before on the show and to people that I'm a guy that barely graduated high school. I moved out when I was 17 and I tried to get 3 years of college and it just did not fit for me. And I never finished college. You, on the other hand, went on to not only get through school, but you also went to Cornell University and became an attorney. I mean, that's a whole path in itself. And you and I have shared about some of the obstacles and challenges in that for yourself. But can you talk about how growing up as a young man, I think you're from the Pittsburgh area, which is where my dad was from, but how from growing up from Pittsburgh did you end up getting on this path to getting into in the first place, wanting to become an attorney? Let's start there. And then I'm going to revert back to your childhood after that.
So, I grew up in my dad never went to college. My mom was sort of an academic, which at their age, and it's almost 2 generations, right? Because I was the youngest by far. My dad grew up during the Great Depression, rode his bicycle, lived in a tent camp and rode his bicycle to high school. So one of the things that he brought to me, of course, hard work, these sorts of things, but there were things that was very fear-based. And so I was trying to figure out what's the best way to insulate myself from a catastrophic event, like being poor or being homeless or whatever. How do you do that? And I really felt like I knew, well, if you become a doctor or you become a lawyer or you have some skill or degree or something they can't take away from you, that you always have that. And that really was coming from, believe it or not, a lack of abundance. It was a protective measure to make sure that, my rock bottom would never be too low. And that's where the idea came from. I did have, 4 older siblings. 3 of them were doctors. So very much the same way, but they were better academics than me for sure. And typical with entrepreneurial people is the inability to sit still. You can see it in people. And, school rewards the people that can sit still, among other things, right? So school's going to reward somebody who's smart, somebody who can recall information for a test, right? And can sit still long enough to read the text and all that sort of thing. And I had some of the other pieces, but I did not have the sit still thing. And it's very difficult.
You had enough, well, you and I have talked about this before, you had enough of the other pieces that allowed you to outweigh that piece that seems so important of what you just said. I mean, you gain information pretty quickly and you process quickly. So how did you learn maneuvering through when you're in these classrooms of having to get these credits and learn these topics where other people were studying and they were, academics and you weren't necessary, but you still ended up getting a law degree? How did you learn to adjust what your strengths and challenges were within that academia environment to still get the end result that you wanted?
Well, I did not do a very good job of it. I stayed in it because I was scared to death. I didn't have another path. Sales is obviously a great path, but I never knew a salesperson growing up that was successful enough to actually this is something I want to aspire to. So one of the things that was a great life lesson for me was the difference of the way things were structured. And this is the way school was structured for me in different programs. And it created a very different outcome. At the end of the day, I made sure I got straight A's, whatever it was, but the pain level was so much different. And to contrast that was I did a master's degree at Oxford University. And the way that was structured was I had one major assignment every week and I had to present it orally. And so therefore, there was no getting around it. There was no, hiding or whatever. And I was forced. And so what happened was, day or two before the test is when I would have the crisis. I would do nothing. I'd play basketball or fool around or do whatever. And then like, oh my gosh, I have 48 hours until I have to give this oral presentation. Then it was a small nightmare. And this happened 50 times because there were 50 of those presentations. Wow. And then when it came time for the exam, I was so prepared. I'd never been so prepared. I just read through my notes, the oral presentation. I had to read what I had to write it down and then present it orally. I just read through my 50 packs of notes one time, went in and aced the exam. Law school was done very, very differently. And there was absolutely no intermediate steps. Take courses and had the final exam, period. There's no midterm exam. There's no grades on participation. So go to school or don't go to school. They don't care.
Right.
So I got 5 classes and then a final exam. And so it was an absolute nightmare. Law school was a nightmare. Now, Oxford was not a nightmare. And what I learned looking back was that success for someone, especially like me, and I share this with lots and lots of people, lots of people that weren't particularly good in school, for example, how do you create success outside of that in work is that the giant project is never going to work for me. If I have the giant project, it's got to be broken down into those 50 little steps. And then I have to have a little exam, at each of the 50 points. So for example, Steve, I know you do coaching and are very, very good at it. I was never more productive. At one point in time, I look back and I had 4 separate coaches that I was accountable to at the same time. I was never more productive than that period of time. So it has nothing to do with how much is on your plate. For me, it has nothing to do with the workload. Like, give me very little work, and I promise you, I can be very unproductive with that very small amount of work.
You're one of those guys that acts well on pressure. And I've seen you do it numerous times where you don't think you're going to be able to do it and you'll grab it, you'll get reconnected and you'll direct. And it sounds like from a young age, whether it was fear or understanding how to break these things down into chunks as the steps you just mentioned, when did you realize, because it seemed like you somehow use fear as your fuel, and then you realize that you had to have a different system to excel than maybe some others had. So did that become a secret sauce for you at some point, combining those two things?
Well, at some point I realized that, and I know you love to talk about mindset. And one of the things that I had to do was stop beating myself up for not being like somebody else. So someone is always going to be more organized than me. Steve, you do a lot of things very, very well that I struggle with. So creating, once you get to a certain point, I can't function without a phenomenal executive assistant. So I have that. But what do you say? Well, I can't afford an executive assistant. How are we going to do that? There are systems that you can put into place. Definition of a system, my definition is just a checklist, right? So here's the 14 things that need to get done. and I can have that checklist to guide me. Instead of beating myself up for being disorganized, which I did plenty of times, I would pay the cable bill when they turned the cable off. And it didn't matter whether I had money or not. Sometimes I didn't pay the cable bill because I didn't have money for the cable bill. So a lot of times I didn't pay the cable bill. I had plenty of money for the cable bill, but I didn't, I wasn't paying attention. So little system. One of my systems, again, that I carry forward to this day is I don't write any checks. As soon as I start writing checks, it creates a total mess. So that there's a centralized bill payment situation. So Steve, if you rendered services for me, you're like, hey, I need to be paid on the day of, or if somebody's going to run out to my house because I broke the garage door last night. And if somebody's going to run out to my house, well, we need to be paid on the spot. I have to have a way other than me paying them, right? Because it just messes up my finances. So I have a hard and fast rule, which is, okay, well, I don't write checks. I don't pay bills, right? And that sounds fancier than it is, but the idea behind it is that I know what things mess me up, and I've created little systems to prevent that.
Yeah. Well, you've learned to delegate. You clearly, and I've observed, what your strengths are, and you're good about letting go of what you're not good at or what you don't love doing. You might be good at it, and of also unpacking how something's supposed to work. And then, like you just said, I've noticed these systems are in place. So for any entrepreneur listening or business owner, the importance of systems, whether it's in bill paying or a checklist or a delegating. One of the things I had to find as I was growing as a leader was I was sometimes a control freak, and it was hard for me to let go. Paul, let's talk a little bit about tying into letting go or delegating. Specifically, when you got out of college, you got your degree from Cornell University, which is pretty prestigious. You had this time and interaction with Oxford, and you not only just became an attorney, but you jumped into the deep end of the water. And if I remember correctly, you were right into Washington, D.C., and you had so many stories about some of the icons that you worked with there. So how did you go, okay, I used this system through school to maneuver what I needed to differently than others. I stopped beating myself up of what I was or what I wasn't, but all of a sudden, boom, someone thought you were good enough to get into the depth of our government in Washington. So let's talk about transitioning your skills from academia to real life. And then I want to bring the next transition into real estate after that. So let's talk a little bit about your journey from law to Washington.
Well, I consider it to be a great anecdote. I find it to be very, very funny. And that is, I was sitting with my girlfriend and we had gone back to Kalamazoo, Michigan. And her aunt and uncle were helping her around the house after her mom had passed away. And the uncle, who was quite a bit older than me, was, first of all, he was mowing the lawn for her. I can contribute in a lot of ways, like yard work is not one of them. And I was sitting in the grass, watching him mow the lawn with her aunt, and her aunt looked at him and reflected in such a kind way. He had retired as chairman of a bank, and he had been CEO of a bank and chairman of several different banks and had this phenomenal career. And she kind of marveled at him pushing the lawnmower and said, my husband, he never sought a promotion. He went to college. After he left college, he went to the bank. He was a bank teller. He did such a great job as a bank teller that they, promoted him to assistant manager, and just, all the way up. And, he definitely had the thing where they didn't recognize maybe his skill at the bank he was at. You start as a teller. Are they really going to make you CEO of that bank? So then another bank, regional bank, said, hey, we could have you over here as a vice president, and throughout his whole career. And she said, all he did was he stuck his nose to the grindstone, and he worked very hard, and he did great at what he did, and he was promoted along the way. And I was like, wow, that's so amazing, And I sat and I reflected on that in my own career, and I was like, oh my gosh, that has never happened to me. Not one time. I have control freaked or, marionetted, my way into every single position I've ever had. Even getting into law school, I did it differently than other people. I put the law school application, and then I would start calling the admissions office. And some schools said, hey, you know what? Don't call us again. We don't want, I'd be like, oh, hey, it's Paul Morris. I'm so delighted to, I really want to come to NYU Law School, And they said to me, please don't call again. Okay. And I go, okay. And then I didn't call again. Cornell Law School, where I was on the wait list, they're like, you know what? Call us every week, because we want to say yes to people on this wait list that really want to come. And you may get accepted somewhere else. You may want to go somewhere else or whatever. But if you tell us every week you're still interested, we will keep you on the top of the pile. So it's not going to work in every instance, but every single thing that I did. And then I ended up going to Cornell Law School, not one of the other ones that said, hey, don't call us.
Right.
So every position, I have politicked for or thrown my own, even within Keller Williams, I remember somebody coming around saying, hey, they're looking for a new regional director, da 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 da. And I waited till the meeting was over and I called that guy. I said, hey, I want you to recommend me. Would you be willing to do that? And then we talked all about whether I wanted to do it or didn't want to do it. And I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. So I said, I want to be direct with you and say, I may not want to do this. So if you're not comfortable recommending me, that's okay. I may not want to do it, but I know I want them to want me.
Right. Exactly.
I want to interview for the position, right?
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'll do that. And I said, I'll be respectful about it. I'll tell them in advance I may not do this. And I'm flattered that they're asking, even though I created that interview. And so really, I made my own magic in that way. Now, making your own magic might be sticking your nose to the grindstone and working very hard. I often will give advice, right? And, somebody was asking for different bits of advice on video. And one day I shot the advice of, my mom told me, whatever job you do, no matter how lowly it is, do your absolute best. And it will benefit you in the long run. And I believe in that advice. And while giving that advice, I also said, and I never took that advice, right? Yeah. If it was a job I hated, I never gave it my all.
Right. Well, and I know there's a quote that we had that I knew you liked. You put enough on your social media at one point. It's slide number 4 there, I think, Joshua. And for those that can see this was you're in front of some building, but it says, the mind once stretched by a new idea never returned to its original dimensions. And although that was a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, I think, Paul, you believe that wholeheartedly and you do that in your life. So when you got out of law school and then you went to Washington, D.C., let's just take 1 minute and talk about your 1 or 2 minutes about Washington, D.C. And then I want to talk about getting you when you got all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast and then went from law to real estate. So let's just do a little bit of that transition. Once your mind was then stretched and you had this new idea and it never returns to original dimension, how did you end up in Washington, D.C. as a law clerk?
So clerking for a federal judge, is a prestigious thing to do at the end of law school. And I did very much the same thing. It was another thing that I knew that I was sending out a bunch of applications. I wasn't getting any calls. Interview with the federal judge. And I did the same thing. I started calling all the judges, chambers. Hey, it's Paul Morris. I applied as a clerk. By the way, I'll be in Washington, D.C. this certain week. And they know that law school students, when you apply, if you apply to a big law firm, they pay for your airfare. You apply for a federal judge clerkship, nobody can pay for anything. So they're like, oh, wait a minute, Paul Morris, he's going to be in Washington, D.C. on whatever date, So if you're going to grant me an interview, it would be awesome if you could put it in these dates. I had no interview. And so they will go, oh, hold on, please. And sometimes you get the hang up, don't call the judge's chambers and we're going to throw your application in the garbage can, which was the same anyway, because I wasn't getting any calls.
Right.
But again, it was that sort of thing. Also, when I then worked for a big law firm, but then when I went to sort of the high level position at the Department of Justice, it was the same thing. It was a guy that was a professor at Oxford. He wasn't my professor, but he was a guy that became a very, very good friend. His credentials were absolutely through the roof. And he recommended me for this high level position at the Department of Justice. And that's how I got there. Now, my credentials were light for that particular position, but I had the EQ that some of the other kids don't have, right? So that the kids that just do well in school, right? Generally, it's not always true, but generally don't have the EQ.
And can you explain for those that maybe are listening in that don't know exactly what EQ is yet? Can you explain to them what that is and how you knew you had that versus, some other IQ, EQ, whatever it might be? So can you explain to the audience on EQ?
So EQ is emotional intelligence. It's how you get along in the world. I think it's how well you do with people. It's something you can learn to be a lot better at. You have to want to learn. Some people are naturally very good at it. Some people aren't. But you can improve it. And listening, is the biggest EQ attribute. Listening to other people, not selling, but asking questions. Naturally, of course, Steve, you're very high on it. You ask great questions. When people love to talk about themselves, right? So sure, I love to be on a podcast. You ask me all these great questions. I get to do the answers. That's great. People love to talk about themselves. So asking people about themselves rather than saying, hey, let me tell you about me. Even when you're speaking, like on a podcast like this, I'm really trying to, yes, you're asking questions about me. I'm trying to talk about things that will be useful to the audience. And that's what's going to make them, that's a version of EQ.
Yeah, great. And I've again observed you. I've been able to work with you as a client and a friend for many years now, and observed your ability with your IQ, because you have, I don't know what your IQ is, but you obviously have high intellect because you retain data very quickly. You get concepts very quickly, and adapting that for others in that EQ piece is something, especially in the sales, that we're going to talk about in the second break we come back, as you got into real estate sales. But if someone is not sure about their EQ or their IQ or how to balance that in, what is it that you would say if someone was in the workplace right now and they're trying to figure out how to connect more with others? And you gave some good examples there. Gotten you further in life than your IQ?
Well, for sure. IQ, it's an intelligence, like it's basically like the Intel processor in your brain. How fast can you process? In life, it depends. Okay, so if you're a philosopher, then IQ is going to be everything and EQ is going to be very low. And and I have philosopher friends. Interesting that their IQ is off the chart, off the chart, and EQ much less, right? But most workplaces, I was really thinking all workplaces, but it's just not true. It's like where we are, Steve, within business and any sort of people business, then EQ is going to be more important than IQ. And again, that's good news, because you really can improve with that. Also, execution is going to be more important than good ideas.
Right.
There's so many good ideas, right? It's like executing is the key.
Well, one of the things your company, Keller Williams, does very well, and you do well personally. And I want to come back from the break because we have to jump on a break, and we're going to jump into some new places that Paul has been in the real estate world currently, and then how he got there with some of the successes and challenges he's had, even during a global pandemic, running a real estate company, starting a real estate company. But one of the things that Paul's company, Keller Williams, and then Paul himself does very well, beyond the IQ and the EQ, and in my last book, I talked about SQ, spiritual intelligence, but there is personality stuff as well that plays in. And the DISC. Some of you have heard about DISC and the DISC personality piece that can also help identify some of the strengths of your personalities. Paul actually teaches classes and workshops within his company of how to identify and connect with others, how to identify and do your own self-assessment, and how to be better in the world. So we're going to come back from the break with Mr. Paul Morris, talk about more how do you dig deep into building businesses, making them successful, scaling them, and also at the same time create a happy and harmonious life. So come back for segment 2 on the Alchemy of Business. We'll be right back. Thank you for listening in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Alchemy of Business, where we are always talking about finding ways to help people make wiser decisions, create greater profits in their life and business, and focus on having higher purpose and meaning. And no better person to do that with than Mr. Paul Morris, who I've known for quite a few years now and is out doing some great stuff in the world. So, Paul, before the break, we were talking about how you transitioned from law school and then into being a law clerk in Washington for a judge. And then how the heck did you end out in LA? Because where I met you was in LA after you'd been a very successful icon in the real estate industry for many years. And I didn't know that you had been an attorney prior to that. So let's talk for this segment on the show on some sound bites of some quick transitioning from the East Coast to the West Coast, transitioning from law to real estate. And then I want to talk about how you started building a real estate company.
Sure. So the transition to real estate is a lot more interesting because I transitioned East Coast to West Coast because my brother was out on the West Coast and the weather was phenomenal. And I wanted to see what was going on in a giant city like Los Angeles, having grown up in Pittsburgh. Transition to real estate, very different because I had the only rich person I'd ever really known in my life was my dad's cousin, and he did it through real estate. It was something that I found to be very accessible, something I could understand fairly well. My sense of the stock market, maybe you'll have like a stock market guru on sometime, and that will be great, but I just don't believe in it. I know that the blue chip stock companies, when I grew up, were United States Steel and General Electric, and nobody knows Alcoa and nobody knows who they are. Those also based in Pittsburgh. That's how I knew them. But where is United States Steel today? United States Steel was the Apple or Google of before. Now, if I buy a duplex in West Hollywood, which is right down the street from Beverly Hills, where I'm sitting right now, where's that going to be in 40 years? So where's Apple going to be in 40 years? They may have taken over the world. I don't know. Or maybe a new technology came in and scooped them. I don't know. Where is a duplex in West Hollywood going to be 40 years from now? It's really generational wealth. So right. I believe in real estate, number one, because I think I know it to be generational wealth. And number two, I find it to be quite accessible. So I have no idea what's going to happen in a stock. I don't think really anybody can predict that all that well. But real estate markets are easier to understand, and that's why I really advise people to invest where they know first. Don't go for the invest.
Well, there's a quote. You have a quote from one of your books we're going to talk about in a minute, but on slide 5 there, Joshua, Paul's got himself there with some of his books in his. That's not. Oh, that is one of your dogs, isn't it? But your comment here ties in what you just said. Shift your thinking from working for money to working for wealth. So you were saying you wanted to invest and be involved in things that you could understand and that you could fear that you could get your hands around and track. And is did that thinking that I read on this quote you had happen before you decided to switch to real estate, or once you got into real estate, you started having that thinking?
So, it definitely helped cause, it was a progression for sure. And I wanted to make sure that, I had to keep my day job, right? Because you weren't going to make the kind of money investing in real estate. That's really the creation of long-term wealth. People buy and flip houses all the time. I have done it occasionally. It's not my thing because, as I mentioned before, my executive function, my keeping everything straight, like I could really mess up a flip, but I can really understand a real estate market, and I always make the money going into the deal. Once I buy it, the money's already been made. So I'm not all that interested in flips because, you have to work so hard to find the right one. You have to work so hard to fix it up, and then you sell it and you make an ordinary income gain, which is taxed at my tax bracket is 52%. And then you got to look for another house, start over again. Like I don't have it in me. Now, I can look for houses every single day knowing they're going to a portfolio that's going to build wealth over time for me. Real estate also you can add leverage to, which is conservatively borrowing money to buy real estate in a way that you cannot do in the stock market. There are also pretty significant tax benefits in real estate that you don't have in the stock market. So that's why real estate is and has always been the investment of choice for me.
Well, it sounds like you subscribe to the philosophy of Warren Buffett as well, buy and hold, specifically on the real estate space. And you do that in other areas of your life. Buy and hold, meaning friendships and lifetime. I was going to mention that Paul has a partner of his name, Eddie Krifter, and Eddie and Paul have been friends since they were early teens, and they became business partners, but they've held on to the importance of that relationship. Paul also has many other relationships that he has with people in his company that are long-term relationships. And in your real estate portfolio, Paul, you and Eddie have quite many roofs of different things that you guys have held on to assets together, right? So how many land barons, so to speak, and in different ways, right? Don't you have a lot of buy and hold real estate you've had over the years too?
Yeah, roughly 600 apartment units and also some commercial retail. And it really, of course, is a sizable portfolio, but I really feel like I did it one door or 5 doors or whatever at a time. We did buy one, I think that is 260 units, but primarily they were, 6 units or 12 units or whatever. I've now started doing that in Los Angeles, also keeping in line with my buy where philosophy. So the only real estate that I own is in Pittsburgh, where I used to live, where Eddie still lives, and we have a management company there, and Los Angeles, or the areas right around Los Angeles, which I can really see and touch, and I really know what's going on in those markets.
Well, you and Eddie and your team have built one of the largest real estate companies in the nation. You were talking about brands earlier of different companies that people would know in other industries. How did you end up landing at Keller Williams, and how have you and Eddie and your team become one of the top 2 real estate franchises networks within that organization nationally? Can you give us just kind of a quick synopsis of why a brand versus Paul Morris Real Estate? And why has your success been greater than others who have tried this path?
So if you put me in the, just being very not humble, but also willing to be self-deprecating. If you put me into Paul Morris Real Estate 20 years later, which is really how long we've been at it, 20 years later, I don't believe Paul Morris Real Estate would be, the second largest independent firm in the country. I don't think I would have been able to do that on my own. Certainly not given the skill set I had 20 years ago. I've been developing a skill set. Now, going with a big brand and being a franchise, what they were saying is, hey, just do this. Do it this way. We're going to tell you what to do. Now you do it. Now, I'm not taking anything away from myself. There were thousands of people that wanted to do that, and I did it at a very, very high level. I'm just saying that there are also thousands of people that would want to do the independent, their own brand, and I would not have done it at such a high level because we're going to show you how to do it and now execute. So franchising or getting into business with somebody who knows how to do it already and being willing to be the person that will execute at a high level is how I was successful at that.
And then, so in that finding this, and it kind of comes back to you were talking earlier in your own path before real estate, having systems, having processes, knowing where your strengths and weaknesses are. So it sounds like you were able to plug into an ecosystem that had some of these things done for you. And then your EQ, your drive, your passion in attracting other people allowed that to excel. So I'm curious I've asked you this privately before, but I'd like for the viewers who are in building teams, or in this case, you also having a partner, a very respected and long-term partner, what do you look for in partnerships to make sure that they last? And what are you looking for, and how do you define leaderships that are, at least in your ecosystem, that are excelling more than others? So partnership and then leadership, are they the same traits? Are they different?
So, partnership is sort of a higher level bar for me, for sure. So getting the right people on the bus, the right people in the right position, in the right context, which is a third one. A lot of people say, right person on the right seat of the bus. And the context is also important. And the context would be like, where are you in time in their journey? And where does it fall on your journey? So you can recruit anyone to be on your team. If you do this, are you able to be the vehicle to take them where they want to go? Okay, so it's very important. It's also, you can see it's very focused on them. So I'm not hiring this person for them to go on their journey. I'm hiring this person because they're going to help me on my journey. But if I want to hire the best in the business or the best for that thing, I need to know where I fit in to take them where they want to go. And if I can sit down with somebody and say, hey, where do you want to go? Does our vision align? Great people don't do the things you want them to do because you told them to do it. Great people do the things that you need them to do because it's in alignment with what they want. And so sometimes a lot of people are in a job because it pays a living, and and then they've got a side gig, or they're 9 to 5 or whatever it is, and then their thing is being with family, and they're like, hey, when I'm done with work, I'm done. Now I'm gonna spend time with family because that's what's important to me. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. However, if you want build that empire, right? You want empire builders on your team, you got to find out where they want to go and make sure that you've got alignment.
Well, and you're great about that with your team, finding out where they want to go, why they want to get there. And you actually wrote a book about that you've incorporated in your team. And you have a book that, after building this real estate company that you and your team built to over 10,000 transactions a year, multiple offices. But you also co-wrote a book with another Keller Williams executive and owner, David Osborne, and you and he had a New York Times bestselling book called Wealth Can't Wait. Can you tell us how this book came about? And can you give us a few key items that people would learn from this book if they were to read it? And you can find it on Amazon. Paul also has a website we're going to show at the end of the show here that you can catch him there as well. But Paul, tell us about how this book came about and what's in it.
Well, I early on became the head of a sales force, and there was always somebody better to teach sales training. I like to do it, by the way, but am I going to teach a listing presentation when you've got experts at that? So my contribution was that I found that the sales training encouraged people and taught people how to turn their time into more money. So they're working, you can work smarter, you can work better, you can make more money working. What I found was that wealth did not always correlate with that. So that you could have somebody making a lot more money, but are they building a lot more wealth? Maybe they're spending more. So I found, especially with salespeople, and I have a sales personality as well, but salespeople are often not particularly great at building wealth. I was able to do that. So I was teaching wealth building classes to our real estate agents as a value add. And I used that material to build that curriculum to write the book. David is a phenomenal wealth builder as well. And he was doing the same thing. His dad had passed away. He wanted to leave a legacy and was starting to write his own book. We decided to do it together. Writing a book is exactly the type of thing that I would be absolutely miserable at, because you have to set aside time. You have to, when are you going to write? It's very undefined, and I don't do well with that. And we did great because we had little chapter heads and we had a little work assignment. I designed it, as I mentioned before, like Oxford, right? If it's like, hey, meet me in a year and bring me the transcript, I'm not saying for sure I'm going to fail at that. That's going to be a struggle for me. If you go, hey, here's the transcript we want to have a year from now. Let's break that down into 50 little writing assignments. It's exactly what I did. I followed what worked for me at Oxford. And I loved it. I like, oh, hey, I have to write 10 pages on this one thing and I would write it and it would be all good. And before you know it, right, 10 pages times 50, you've got 500 pages. Now, of course, you cut that back. That's how the book came to fruition.
And does that same practice apply to building wealth? So if someone's asking, well, gosh, I don't have a lot of money to get started right now, and I'm trying to figure out how to take the first step to build wealth, or maybe someone does have a lot of wealth and they're trying to figure out how to save it and protect it. But let's start for that listener that may be trying to build right now, and they're struggling right now to make the monthly net they have for their family and their own mortgage or their bills. And they're trying to figure out how to carve money for investing in creating some form of wealth for the future.
So notwithstanding my advice that I never invest in the stock market, the first thing I would do is I would open an IRA or a tax deferred retirement plan. The reason why is you get very tax efficient use of that. You put pre-tax dollars in those accounts. Even if you're in the red, meaning you have more debt than you have assets, I would open one of those accounts. There are very inexpensive firms that do that, like a Schwab or Fidelity or whatever, and make a habit of it. So putting a certain amount of money toward your retirement. I literally, within the last couple of months, I had a retirement fund when I was the government, which was a very short period of time. And I maxed out every year. It was maybe $7,000 that I put in maybe 3 years because I had 3 years in government service. I couldn't find where the documents were for it. But I'm like, I know I have a retirement plan. I know I just couldn't find it. And then eventually, like in the mail, somehow eventually it got to me. And that $21,000 was $140,000. Now, I didn't do any stock picking because when you're in the federal government, they put it in a blind trust for you. So I checked the box, like growth stocks, whatever. So $140,000 is real money for sure. So I would start with that. The next place to do is I would buy your own house. And, there's lots of podcasts that are on house hacking. And way before that was a word, that's exactly what I did because I was living in Washington, D.C. It was very expensive. So you can, when you're buying your primary residence, you can get extremely favorable terms, meaning you can put down very little money. Lots of your mortgage payment is tax deductible. And if you can't afford that house, you can't afford those payments. What I did many, many years ago was buy a house. I couldn't afford the payments. I could afford the very low down payment. I put roommates in to pay the, I started off, what the same amount that I was paying in rent was my contribution to the mortgage. There were 3 of us there. And eventually, I was living rent free in a very, very, nice house in Washington, D.C. So that's the next step. Also, if you can find deals, you really do the work to find deals. You can use other people's money to do that. And that's how I started. Eddie and I bought a duplex together on the courthouse stairs, that we had the money for. Our second deal was a much larger deal. And we used our brother's money. And we created what is the term for it is syndication, but all syndication is using other people's money to invest in real estate. So my brother had some money, his brother had some money. We took their money together. We put it into a great real estate. We were 25, quarter partners each. And, and you give them a preferred rate of return, you pay them first. And we all ended up at the end of the day with a lot of money from that first investment. I think we all netted out at least $1 million from that one first investment.
That's a long way to come from having roommates on couches and paying mortgages. So kudos on that. And for those listening in, where there's a will, there's a way. And on slide number, I think it's number 12 here. So Joshua the one where Paul's website, number 9. For those that are viewing this, you can learn more about Paul, and we're not finished yet, but I want to make sure because this topic about syndication, about wealth, not only can you find that in his book, Wealth Can't Wait, but Paul also has a website, morrisx.com. And for those that are seeing it, you'll see his visual here. We're going to put that in the show notes as well. I highly recommend getting his book, maybe checking out some of his website items. He's also been involved in a show talking about real estate. Real Estate Rock Stars is the name of the show, I believe. Talking to salespeople who are awesome real estate agents, but also themselves investors, Paul, and in real estate. So can people still find you on that show upcoming?
So Real Estate Rockstars is really geared toward realtors, and it's a great show if you're a realtor. Bigger Pockets is a great investment podcast. I was interviewed on Bigger Pockets, and I give my 3 rules of how I follow these 3 rules and didn't lose money and have not lost money in a single real estate deal in 25 years. I think the best way to find that would be Google Paul Morris Bigger Pockets.
We'll go ahead and put it in the show notes. So we'll put it in the show notes for everyone. So that way you can just click right in.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
And also Instagram is good, but you'll put that in this as well.
Very good. Yeah, we're going to do an Instagram session in just a minute. So I think there's so much to unpack on syndication. I'd love to come back at some point in the future and just do a whole show specifically focused on syndication, because there's so much there and so much meat. And I'm tempted to go down that path right now, but we only have like 7 minutes left. So I want to spend some time digging on some other topics. So you've gone from this path of law or academia, law, transitioning states, different environments from east to west, having partnerships, defining what leadership is, scaling your business, getting people on the right seat to the bus, opening numerous offices, maneuvering through the franchise world. So what are some things of life lessons, Paul, that you're looking now in your age that you are versus when you were a 20-year-old man? What are some key lessons that you know just for your own psyche that are kind of some simple rules of life that you have about mindset or living life or, anything? Do you have any quick words of wisdom before we jump into another segment I want to do on Instagram? But I want to just get your current perspective on life philosophy.
So, I always talk about the magic zone. The magic zone to me is really where your passion meets your ability. And then that leads to a highly productive effort. So if you give me something to do that I don't like doing, you can force yourself to do it. But over time, your productivity is going to wane. Does it give you energy? Does it take energy away? That's the magic zone. So another thing, is that, and I would have said BS on this, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but, I really have found that your net worth will never exceed your self-worth. And so really working on yourself, you want to build wealth, work on yourself. I know people that are just naturals at it. And then other people sort of, they hit a ceiling, and then, they self-sabotage, or things go sideways, or they have the great idea, they execute, it just never happened. So that net worth never exceeds your self-worth. You can work on that as well. The people you surround yourself with, they used to have, I forget, it was like a cell phone commercial or whatever, but it's like, who's your 5 inner circle or whatever, but that's a real thing. So who you surround yourself with makes a big difference. And I'm not saying that, hey, I have a school teacher friend and he hasn't built a lot of wealth because he's a school teacher, kick him off my team. Or I will say, like, your net worth is generally the average of your 5 closest friends, right? So I'm like, I need a few more billionaire friends, right, to up that game. So there's another piece to it that's more subtle than that. So I'm not kicking my school teacher friend out of the inner circle because he's such an amazing person and contributes. But who I will kick out of the inner circle is the energy suck. The person that's just the energy vampire. Taking your energy away. And you talked about a lasting relationship I had with Eddie. It's one of our other childhood friends. Would call me and say, "Hey, Paul, how are you?" He wouldn't even wait for the answer, and it'd be like, like all the complaining. I'm like, and I used to gravitate towards him, and I had this in mind. I'm like, okay, well, I don't have to cut him out entirely, but I realized that he's not contributing. He's not. And negative self-talk, replacing that with the positive self-talk. Affirmations. These things that again, which seemed quite hokey to me a long time ago, really, really do make a difference. I've been listening to an affirmation thing, meditation before I go to bed, and I'm like, it's 22 minutes. I listen to 2 minutes, I'm out cold.
What a good way to have your mind go down with positive stuff in it. Yeah.
And the opposite of that, I'm always on a self-improvement, always working on self-improvement. I had the same therapist for 10 years, and about 7 years ago, I said to her, I'm having these horrible nightmares. I never have nightmares, like these horrible. And she's just like, she goes, "Well, what are you doing right before you go to bed?" And that's all she did was ask the question. I'm like, I'm going to show my therapist how dumb I am. Like, can we erase that? Because my answer to that question was, I was watching Game of Thrones before I went to bed. And I'm like, okay, I don't have to answer that. I already know. No, but I did.
You got that in your software as you were going down. Your brain was still processing that. You had a sword in your hand. You were ready to rock and roll, right?
Yeah. I was watching Game of Thrones. And she's like, "Well, are you crazy? Do you get it?" So when your therapist asks you if you're crazy, that's a bad thing. So the other thing is, taking responsibility responsibility, and it's just taking responsibility for everything. Everything in your life really is, it's a product of where you are, and mindset, where you are mentally, whatever. And that goes for people that have lots of wealth and people that don't have lots of wealth. If you don't want wealth, that's okay too, but really taking responsibility. So like, what bad thing happened to you? And then we all have those people in our lives, and some of them I love dearly. It's like they're just going to tell you all the bad things that happened, and it just have an awareness of that. Listen for it. I remember the first time that somebody taught me the difference between light and heavy. If I say, Steve, you have to do this, you just go light or heavy. You go, that's good advice, but it's still a little heavy. If I go, hey, Steve, have you ever considered doing X, Y, and Z? Might that help you? Is that something you would consider? It's way lighter, right? So just like light versus heavy. Watch for light versus heavy. Watch for negative versus positive in what you do, as well as what other people do. Because at the end of the day, you can only control yourself, right?
I love that, light versus heavy. And I love that, again, a reminder for all of us about we're responsible for all of our actions. I had one of my mentors and friends, long-term mentor, Brian Tracy, on a few weeks back. And Brian was also talking about that, one of the lessons in life about learning that we are responsible for all actions, all thoughts, and all deeds in our life. So thanks for that reminder. We're going to roll in towards the end of the show here. We always wrap up with a fun little segment on something that my show engineer is going to introduce for us on Instagram, a little fun little spot. And then we're going to wrap up conversation at the end of the call with a little bit more seriousness too on a topic about spirituality and spiritual intelligence, since we were talking about EQ and IQ and various things. Joshua, tell us what's going on here on this next segment.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Alchemy of Business. Interestingly interesting Instagram. And the rules are simple. We take a quick dive on your photos, your Instagram feed. We pull them up, some interesting ones without context, and you share and tell us more about what's happening in the photo. Sound good?
Sounds good. I'm ready.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah. Now I'm worried about what I have on my Instagram, but carry on.
Okay. So for those of you that can't see the photo, I'm going to describe it to you. Paul is sitting on a brick windowsill with some very wise but ancient looking people. It looks like he's having an engaging conversation. Where are you here, Paul? And what's this about?
So in Havana, Cuba, and it's an elderly woman smoking a cigar. I came across her and I couldn't believe how cool she looked. And I wondered what is going to happen. What words of wisdom is she going to have? So I just sat down. I go, hey, seems like you're enjoying that cigar. What's going, just a little chat and finding out perspective on life from someone decades older than me.
Wow, very cool. Next slide we've got for you is it was enough to be on your slide. It doesn't have people in it, but it has food. I know you are a foodie. You and Eddie love good restaurants, and you love being a food connoisseur. So I think this has something to do with food. Can you tell everybody what this is about?
Well, this was an example of what I felt was like amazing marketing. And so the restaurant group that does this particular takeout, they do such a phenomenal job. The food is excellent for sure, but the packaging is just phenomenal. And in a real estate franchise, the way that you market things really makes a difference. It really, really does. And so many real estate coaches or whatever will actually tell you the opposite. It's the number of contacts you make and that sort of thing. And I liken this to, one thing that Apple really has down is that any product that you buy from Apple, you feel like Christmas morning when you're opening it. It's like, you peel the plastic off, and then there's the box, and there's the thing in the box, and it's like you're giving yourself a gift of jewelry when you buy, AirPod Pro or whatever.
Right.
And this was very similar. And so I was just sort of showcasing the marketing aspect.
Well, the packaging, you advise your agents and your agents advise their sellers on staging their homes, making it look as appealing as possible and making that happen. So that flows right in your business all the time. And for anyone that's got products or services, packaging and marketing and the experience that a consumer has is key. Okay, we have another slide here, another photo. We've got you looking intently. We're going to talk in a minute about your yoga real quick before we wrap up, but it looks like a partial yoga move, but with a table and a laptop and in public. What's going on here?
So this is why I love you get ask me a question. I will tell you the truth. And the truth is I staged that photo, and I staged it because a really amazing, my girlfriend and this really phenomenal yogi guru friend of ours sent us a photo of this like crazy pose that he was in. And so I'm like, okay, well, I have my assistant. I'm like, let me do a half lotus while I'm working. So it was staged, and my yogi guy for that particular picture is like, you're hunched over a little bit. I
He
did
started
take
giving you
another one
posture
where I
technique.
sat up straighter, but I was trying to do the humble brag of how flexible I am.
Yeah, and you are. Paul's a yogi for sure. He'll be in meetings sometimes. We'll be in a group of meetings. He goes, oh, I got to be at a yoga class by 6. I got to leave here in 10 minutes. And he's like disciplined about getting to his yoga practice. So I want to come back on that as we wrap up the summit, because I think that is part of your spiritual practice, possibly. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to come back to that. We only have a few minutes left on the show. Joshua, do you have any more slides? I'm speaking of girlfriend here. So you've got a beautiful woman here next to you, both looking happy and harmonious. What's in this photo here going on?
So yes, she's absolutely gorgeous and highly photogenic. I have to go through at least 1,000 where I look halfway decent. She always looks great. So I was happy to come across this one. But one interesting thing about it too is that this was the home that we just moved into that I just bought. And this was before we closed escrow. We had our holiday party there. So we're really having fun at would become my new house.
Ah, very cool. Well, congrats to you both on that. So that's awesome. We're done with that segment. We're going to roll into wrapping up here, Paul. Thanks for all of the wisdom on. We could go on for hours with these topics you had, and so we didn't get to everything I wanted, but we got to a lot. So thanks for the advice about all of the mindset, about taking responsibility, about learning how to use your EQ, your IQ, making sure that leadership is about helping others get what they want, understanding that your net worth is also equally as important. Your self-worth is equally or even more important than your net worth, and you have to work on yourself personally. And you do that through, like you said, therapy, mindset, meditation, yoga. Can you give us a description of how you define spirituality in your life, or how you define spirituality in general? And do you incorporate that into your life and business in what you call an apparent way?
So before I answer that question, I would be remiss in saying that, how amazing it has been, Steve, to work with you. And you played a tremendous part in our organization as a consultant and as a friend, and really, always not afraid to point out the things that need to be pointed out. And one of the things that I said before was judging light versus heavy. And Steve is very effective while always being light. So, you never feel bad when Steve gives you advice. That's a real talent, and it makes that advice more palatable and therefore more effective for people. I think a great mindset thing is when you're giving advice to say, what are they willing to hear? And if they're not willing to hear what you're willing to give, it's not really, it seems more like judgment than advice. So you've got to meet people where they are. That's my advice on it, but it's something that Steve does so well. So
thank you for
really,
that, Paul.
really appreciate all that you've contributed for sure. So, spirituality is for me being aligned and being integrated and in integrity. And what that means to me is one of the things that I like to do is I like to contribute, right? I want to contribute to somebody. I want to contribute to the industry. I want to help people. And I just had these ideas to do that. And yet I remember leaving this one meeting where one of my agents had called to, I'm really at a transitional place in my life and I'd love to meet with you and get some career advice, where I was all fired up to go into that meeting. And I left the meeting thinking like, boy, that was terrible, that meeting. I don't want to do more of those meetings. And I walked out and I go, I have as part of my life that part of my reason to be is helping people. And you know what? Right now, I don't feel like helping people. I don't enjoy helping people. And having the ability to sit with those feelings of, that's okay. What is that really about? And then I get back to my Beverly Hills office and my team leader, Josh Spitzen, then I'm helping him with something. And when I'm done helping him with something, I'm like, wow, that was the greatest thing ever. I'm like, oh, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I do like to help people. What is it? And I kind of redefined it in a way that works for me. And that was, I like to help the willing. And it doesn't mean that somebody has to take my advice. By the way, you can absolutely not take my advice. I'm fine with that. But somebody that was willing to get into action. So they go, oh, well, let me tell you all the terrible things that happened to me. Oh, well, have you considered this? Yeah, no, that's no good. That's not going to work. Well, have you considered that? No, that's going to, well, what would work for you? Oh, I don't know. It's like, okay, well, that's okay. It doesn't make that a bad person. It might just, they're not at a point in time where they are, open to it. I'll give you another sort of little takeaway is when you're looking for a mentor, always come from contribution. When I'm trying to get a meeting with somebody that, may not have the time, I will say, hey, Steve, how do I earn the right to have a 20-minute coffee with you? And usually just asking it that way, coming from contribution, usually I just go, okay, no problem. Now, when I arrive at that 20-minute coffee, I've done research on Steve. I know what Steve likes. I know what's important to him in his life. And I have an organized list of questions. Hey, Steve, I know you said 20 minutes, so I'm going to set my timer at 20 minutes because no matter how great this meeting goes, I want to jump up and run out the door because I know how busy you are. So I'm going to want to leave you in 20 minutes. So I brought you this, single origin coffee from Guatemala because I looked on your Instagram. It seems like you love coffee. So here you go. So, what have you enjoyed in your life? What have you enjoyed in your career? And I'm going to ask these questions that are really going to help me, but they're really a way to allow Steve to showcase himself. So that's, maybe I went off on a bunny trail, but
well, I clearly got from being of service, contributing, and also doing it when you don't necessarily want to do it and assessing that. My wife has a quote that she says all the time about service because she's very heavily in the AA program and a recovery for other women. But she's talks a lot about service. And she says, service isn't service unless it's inconvenient. And I always process that word. And I think what you're saying there is even when you don't want to, when we're being of service to others and giving of ourselves beyond ourself. And I've seen you do that numerous times where you have to go into a meeting or you have to step into something or you have to be in a situation where someone really needs your wisdom, guidance, energy, or spirit. And it's being of service. So I love that you're bringing that up about mindset and self-worth and self-confidence. And for me, when I watch you go do your yoga practice and go, look, I know this meeting is really important. I've got X amount of minutes left on this and we've had this done today, but your practice of yoga, I assume, is some kind of inner conditioning for your own psyche, mind, or self that somehow gives you that condition you need to be able to go out and do that all over again, meaning be of service when you don't want to always be of service. Is that accurate?
So it'll take a whole nother episode for sure.
We'll get the snippet of it.
I want to get your wife on here because I would go exactly the opposite and say that you should help people when giving and receiving are simultaneous, right? And one of the things that I really, I'm the youngest of 5, but I then became the patriarch when my dad passed away. I have a sister whose kids need help all the time. And, I just found myself getting beaten down with, with requests and help and whatever. And I freed myself from all of that by allowing myself to have a quality no, to say no with quality, like, sorry, I can't talk now, but I could talk to you a little bit later. Or how about at 5:30 today or whatever that is. And really integrating in your being, doing the things of service that really speak to you. And I find, by the way, that I'm even encouraged to help more, right? So I'm going to say this. What if I told you my goal is to be of service to people only when it's convenient to me? Your wife would be like, wow, he's a bad person, like not a good guy.
No shooting on Paul, that's for sure.
And I would say this, let's measure the time, okay? And it's not talking about her versus me, but just me versus me. And if you say to me, Paul, how much time do you give to other people that, that's not directly helping you? You would look at that time and go like, wow, it's really you're really a giving person. And as soon as I let go of doing anything that was really truly inconvenient for me or something I really didn't want to do, and that I could say no to that stuff, I end up giving more so that I'm not giving out of obligation, right? I'm giving out of desire to give. And by the way, just taking that alone, it's helped me not say no. I can say yes to so many more things. Here's what I do. I go like this. Steve, you asked me, hey, will you help me? Will you be on my podcast? Well, I want to be on the podcast. That bad example, right? But if you ask me for something and I'm not sure I want to do it, I kind of think I don't want to do it. So I'm pretty sure I don't want to do it. My answer would be no, right? But now what if I'm pretty sure I don't want to do it and I frame a question in my mind and go, well, how can I make this work for me? Right? I can say yes to so many more things, right? And it sounds I know it sounds very selfish. You asked me about spirituality, and being spiritual to me is being in integrity. And so I have in my heart a desire to give, and I have in my heart a desire to help. And one of the things that has helped me make that flourish is by taking away some of the times that I'm helping when I don't want to help.
Yeah,
now is not a good time.
No, that's very powerful. I love that creating the desire to give and to want to give more. I mean, you're freeing up that energy to make that happen. So I applaud that. That's why I'm always intrigued by talking to people about their definition of spirituality and how they contribute and show up in the world, because it is different. I'm not here to proclaim religion or spirituality for anyone. I'm here to learn more about what makes their definition of that work and what does that propel in the inviting good in the world, as my last book talked about. And what you're talking about, you do that. So we're coming out of a time here. I want to thank you for creating the space in your life, Paul, for the desire and the ability and your knowledge and your IQ, your EQ and your empathy and your desire to help others grow. And anybody that's listening in on the show, understanding that if you're leading others or if you're contributing to others, some of the things Paul talked about today, either acquired skills or inbred skills, but ones that can be cultivated. And I think one of the lessons, again, talking about business and life with Paul today, is the importance of increasing your skills and fine-tuning them so that they do get enhanced, whether you're becoming a yogi, whether you're investing in wealth, whether you're building a team, whether you're building a brand. All of those things take skill, and surrounding yourself with other people that allow you to lift yourself up and then allow you to lift them up beyond that. So thank you, Paul, for your contribution today on the Alchemy of Business. We really appreciate being here. We're going to have all of Paul's contact info in the show notes, so you can reach him on Instagram, his website, etc. Paul, any closing thoughts before we wrap up? And again, we're just thrilled to have you on the show.
Again, just thank you. Really appreciate it. And I know that what you're putting out in the world with this show is going to help so many people. And I know that you're not doing it out of just inconvenience, but this is where your heart is taking you. So I want to talk to your, I want that conversation with your wife.
That'll be a good one. I can't wait to have that with you both.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Do that. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening in on the Alchemy of Business, and we will talk with you and see you next time. Thank you for listening in. And if you will enjoy the show and go in and subscribe and do a review, we always appreciate it. It helps us keep up having other listeners get value from these great guests we're having on the show. Wishing everyone the very best in creating your own dreams and your own prosperity in life. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
And that concludes this episode of The Alchemy of Business with your host, Steve Rodgers. If you found value in today's broadcast, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing with friends, and leaving a review. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next Thursday for another episode. Be blessed and see you soon.